Push. Now can you hear me okay? Thank you. So if you don't mind, I'll stay on the panel. I'll speak from here. So I'm delighted to be here. I thank Sam, thank you, Brian, first for hosting us, but also for NED's support for the work that underlies this panel, which has really been invaluable. If I may, I'm going to speak for just about 5 minutes, just brief to set us up, if I can, to describe our project and how we got here. But then I really want the main focus for us to be on our panelists and on the country situations that they're here to share with us on. So again, I'm Rob Quinn. I'm the Executive Director of Scholars at Risk. I'm here with my colleague Jesse Levine, our Advocacy Officer, Lauren Crane, our Research and Learning Officer. And so Scholars at Risk is a network, our full name Scholars at Risk Network. The network part refers to really the higher education sector, universities, associations, related NGOs, coming together. Now we have about 420 institutional members in 39 countries, coming together to help protect the security of that space and to find ways to collectively promote the values that make the higher education sector different, and therefore we think a critical pillar of liberal, democratically legitimate society. So we have 3 areas of activity, which in brief are protection, advocacy, and learning. The protection work is, as the name suggests, specifically looking at direct assistance to threatened individuals, primarily university academics, but also in a very flexible definition of scholars, public intellectuals, human rights defenders, sometimes lawyers, journalists, writers, as well as student leaders, and so forth. And in the most extreme cases, our job is to try to help them find positions of temporary sanctuary when they're not safe to continue work in their home countries. So if you will, think of those positions as lifeboats. So a chance to keep working, to get back on their feet. If conditions improve, they can go home, and if conditions don't improve at home, to get to a next step so that we don't lose these important voices and their home communities don't lose the investment in intellectual capacity that they represent. Within that protection space, we also are increasingly doing more campaigning for scholars who are still at home, such as scholars who are under prosecution or detained, and trying to assist families of members who also suffer when individual scholars are targeted. So that's the protection work. We have what we call advocacy work, which is really traditional research and human rights-based advocacy, and that's mostly what we'll be talking about today. So I'll come back to that in 1 second. But I also want you to know we have a third track, which is what we call learning work, or it's really research and training. And that's a conversation within the higher education sector itself, where we look at the values that are the core values of higher education: academic freedom, autonomy, equitable access, accountability, social responsibility. How are these values able to be exercised in particular places? And how can we link up people around the world who share these values already and try to reinforce their position? And our position on that has 2 sort of guiding stars to it. One is that ours is not a project that's a conversion project. We're not going around trying to convince people that these are our values, but rather that there are people already in universities around the world that believe in academic freedom and in free inquiry and in the expression that comes with it. And how do we link up and how do we be of assistance to those local partners, and hence our network. So those are our areas of work. Within the advocacy space, our job is to try to help raise awareness, number 1, of the problem of attacks on the university space itself, but on intellectual inquiry and related expression more broadly. And so that work began about 10 years ago, where we started doing workshops in different parts of the world, bringing together representatives of universities, university communities, and NGO advocates who are concerned about that sector, to say, what are the challenges that you're experiencing? We wanted to know from people in the field in different countries how they were seeing this problem. And so our norm would be we would bring people from 10 or 15 or 20 countries that were neighboring, and we'd bring them all together into a workshop that would last 2 or 3 days. And we did these in different parts of the world. We did them in Ethiopia and Oman and Russia and so forth. And very quickly we ended up hearing the same thing. Each different place, no matter where it was and who was there, it always started out the same, the first hour. It's different in my country. You don't understand. It's different in my country. And after doing this for a little while, we decided we restructured the workshops. And the first day of the workshop became just the testimony day. And everybody got to say how it was in their country. And by the end of the first day, it was really impossible to believe it's totally different in your country. The context is different. Yes, the history is different. The cultural manifestations are different. But at the end of the day, the methods of using force to silence ideas, to take control over what knowledge is available in society, was the same. And people would hear the same methods were being used on the other side of the world in ways that surprised them, but also reinforced that this is a common effort. So from that workshop project where we began to have a good sense of the picture of the problem, we then moved on to wanting to get a better size measure of the scale of the problem. And so that led to what we call our monitoring project, which is to invite researchers in different parts of the world or from different countries who are already in our network or outside our network and could become a part of our community to report on, in particular, certain types of pressures on the university space. And we narrowed the field, or we sort of created a framework for how to report on these things that ranged from physical violence, killings, disappearances, imprisonments, to the less physical travel restrictions or loss of position, loss of promotion, and that kind of thing. And so from that, we begin to get a snapshot. And that led us to the report, which is the slide that is on your left behind me, the Free to Think report, which came out last June. And it documented, I think it was 333, but forgive me, you have it in front of you, attacks in 65 countries. And I think if you just open to the map and see, you can see this is a widespread dynamic. And if you look at it across the countries, we think we see opportunities. The report, I think, was important in two ways. One, we intentionally didn't organize it as a report that was country-focused, but rather it was type of violation focused. And we did that on purpose because we really see this as one community of knowledge, one higher education sector that's connected across borders. So we don't necessarily want it to have a national orientation to our strategies. So rather organizing it by type of violation then lends itself to responses that are aimed at a particular type of violation. So one's response to travel restrictions might be different from one's response to wrongful prosecutions, and such this panel, as we'll get to, is aiming at that latter wrongful prosecutions. The other thing I think that's important in the report is that we link things that are very, very seriously physical, killings, disappearances, imprisonments, with the things that are not, such as travel restrictions and not getting promotions or losing one's job. And we did get a little bit of pushback on that, saying, well, do we really call those attacks in the same way as you would killings and disappearances? And we recognize, of course, that they're different, but we wanted to be able to show the links between them because in our experience of our protection work, of the direct assistance of scholars, they are very clearly linked. And the earliest phases of persecution usually are not the extreme violence. The earliest phases usually are the attempts to isolate individuals who are exercising their inquiry and expression, and then escalate over time, in many cases, towards a severe violence. So the URL is there. We have copies for the report outside, and I'd urge you all, please take copies, and if you have any feedback on them, we welcome, and we hope to be putting out more of these reports as the project continues. We still have monitors out there working. We have about 45 monitors at the moment, I think. All in all, they have reported over 500 incidents. As I said, there are about 300 included in that report, and it keeps growing and growing. So, but that's where we get to today, okay? Now, normally, I said to someone earlier, these panels happen at the end of a project, when you're announcing, right? So normally you'd have a panel like this for the report itself. And we did have panels for the report when it came out in different parts of the world. But today's panel is a little bit different, and so I want to invite all of you to be a part of it with us, which is really, this is a panel that's happening in the middle of a project. So the follow-up to the report was, how do we target these different types of violations? And one of the types, as I said, was wrongful prosecution. And so now we have formed a working group that is exploring what are the laws that are used in different places to crack down on free inquiry within the university, but also outside the university as well. And so what we wanted to do today was offer you some snapshots of what's going on in a couple of the countries that we're looking at from a few of the people who have expertise to share with us there. But know that this is just a sample, that there are obviously many other countries where these things go on, and we're looking at some of those as well. And the key questions in my mind as I listen to the panelists and as I invite all of you is to say, okay, once we have our sense of what's going on in the different places, where are the commonalities? Where are the leverage points? How can we be helpful to the actors who are on the ground in these places? At a minimum, how do we make sure what we're doing doesn't put them in a worse position? And most important, how do we make a difference? How do we move this forward? So again, with that, all of you are now invited into the middle of this project. And so when we get to the question phase at the end, I invite all of you to share any thoughts based on your expertise or your perspective. Okay? So I'll thank you for that, and I will now introduce our panelists. If it's okay, I will do the abbreviated versions of introductions, but I think you all have them. And so really delighted to have them all here with us. Rafia Zakaria, who will talk about Pakistan, is a Pakistani-American author, a journalist, and a lawyer, and has been involved with our monitoring project really from the beginning and has been enormously valuable to us, and really delighted to have you here. Ahmad Shaheen next, from Egypt, is a visiting professor at Georgetown School of Foreign Service, and he has personal experience with some of the challenges that we're talking about, and obviously knows many other people in the community, so delighted also. Korapin Pwapa Sanwat is a student, a doctoral student at UMass Amherst. Will be talking to us about what has been going on in Thailand over the last several years in particular. And Matar from Bahrain will tell us what has happened for intellectuals there, particularly after the sort of democracy uprisings and in the aftermath of that. So delighted to have all of you here. Thank you for sharing your experience. We said we're going to go just close to 10 minutes per person, and then we'll have plenty of time for questions at the end. Okay, Rafia?
All right. Well, thank you, Rob, and thank you, NED, for hosting this discussion today, and all of you for being here and for the wonderful lunch. Like Rob mentioned, I am the Pakistan Country Monitor for Scholars at Risk Network. And, you know, the major point that I want to emphasize that I think gets left out, there's a lot of talk about Pakistan and education. There's a lot of discussion about how to, both at the elementary level and at the higher education level. There's also a lot of talk about the war on terror. But the portion that gets left out is essentially the fact that the war on terror is as much an epistemological war as it is a military or a strategic exercise. And what I mean by that is that there is a difference in opinion, and you feel this very, very poignantly if you are in Pakistan, which is at the front lines of the war on terror, between people who believe in education as a value that is available and universal to everyone, and people who want to narrow or constrict the bounds of education to essentially a very narrow theological understanding. In this sense, the attacks that you see in Pakistan on higher education, whether they're militant attacks like the attack on Bacha Khan University in January of this year that killed over 50 people, including professors, is making a particular statement. It's not an accidental or opportunistic target or incidental target. It's extremely intentional, because the Taliban, who took credit for that attack, are very specifically saying that this form of education, higher education in particular, is something that is inherently un-Pakistani, non-Muslim, and should not be present in the country. So you have to understand within that context that the professors and the students who continue to pursue higher education in Pakistan very much see themselves at the front lines of this epistemological battle between people who believe in progressive education, who want to protect it, who want to promote it, and people who essentially want to shut down the university. Uh, the guy who was caught for masterminding that attack, and I say this particularly because you'll see what I mean. When he gave a confession, he's Taliban, and he said that they had been casing another university in the province in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, and this is again on the northwestern province of Pakistan, that they had been casing another university, but they weren't able to get in because of the security arrangements at that university. So they waited until the day Bacha Khan University was having a poetry reading, a big peace poetry meet that was going to allow lots of other students and the public to come into the university. And that is the day they struck. So you can see then that line that exists in Pakistan and why higher education in particular, elementary education as well, but higher education in particular, whether it's professors or students, is a target in the war on terror. And you've got university administrations that are functioning with very few resources to try to provide a campus that cannot be penetrated. And of course, as you know, these are any campus. I mean, it's impossible to make it completely impenetrable. So that's the larger context. Within the legal context, I think perhaps those of you who are familiar with Pakistan will know that the blasphemy law in Pakistan, that's 295 A, B, and C, that's the section number, is probably one of the major legal obstacles or major legal instruments via which freedom of expression by scholars and by students is being curbed. It's important to remember that the blasphemy law is actually not a post-partition creation. It was not written, after Pakistan was created and became an Islamic republic. It actually dates from the 1920s. When there was a blasphemy case and the British administration actually instituted this law. But obviously, in the Pakistani incarnation, we've seen cases from dismissals, and as Pakistan, particularly as the war on terror has escalated, and this epistemological war that I'm talking about has made a home within Pakistani discourse, the blasphemy law has essentially become a tool for people who disagree with professors, secular, liberal, even Islamist scholars who do not follow the very, very strict line of the extremist groups as a means for getting them prosecuted. So we've seen dismissals. A lot of this effort, it follows like this. And actually, I'll just give you the case, one of the main cases that I wanted to talk about today. It's a case that's been written about quite a bit. The name of the professor is Junaid Hafiz. He, grew up in Punjab. When he actually got into medical school, which in Pakistan is, a big deal. And then he left medical school because he wanted to study literature. He studied literature for a while in Punjab, and then he actually came to the United States on a Fulbright to, I believe, Jackson, Mississippi, where he studied, again, philosophy and literature. He went back to Pakistan to Bahauddin Zakaria University, which is, again, in the province of Punjab. And while he was there, the Pakistani campus, like I said, all of these issues, the campus in this sense, it is a very volatile and tempestuous environment because everything from what you wear, to where you sit, to what you say, is part of this contention between who gets to control the public sphere and the space of the university. And there are extremist groups who believe that intimidating both professors and students within the classroom and the campus space creates a visible political victory for them. So, so he was there and he was teaching. And, he had, I believe he had an adjunct professorship. And within, a year or so, I think, of his being there, a permanent position opened up that he was going to apply for. And this is when matters came to a head. The leader of one of the extremist groups on campus really did not want him to be employed by the university. And so he got a whole group of people together, and there was essentially this antagonism going on. The way it ultimately went down was that uh, they uh, Junaid Hafiz's opponents ended up filing charges against him based on a Facebook account that was not even in his name. So the charges were that Junaid Hafiz is behind this Facebook account. The name of the account was Mullah Munafiq, that was posting derogatory things about Islam and about the Holy Prophet on Facebook. When the charges were filed, it was said that there were thousands of pages of comments that were attached to Junaid Hafiz, and that was the basis on which the FIR and the charges were filed. Junaid Hafiz was immediately arrested. He continues to be in prison. I think it's been more than 5 years now. He continues to be in prison. And to really understand how difficult it is, not simply to protect these professors, but to then get them acquitted or even try that case, you have to see that, first of all, it was almost impossible for him to get a lawyer to defend himself. Second of all, when Rashid Rahman from the Human Rights Commission of Pakistan took his case, he got a lot of threats. On April 3rd, 2011, there was a hearing held in the Hafiz case, a blasphemy hearing, and Rashid Rahman was representing Junaid Hafiz. And again, the people that had filed the charges had a big mob outside the courthouse to intimidate people, to intimidate his lawyer. And when Rashid Rahman was leaving that hearing, they told him that you will not survive to make it to the next hearing in this case. And sure enough, about 1 month later in May, armed assassins came into Rashid Rahman's office and shot and killed him. So Junaid has a new lawyer now, but of course these tactics continue. He's been moved to Multan jail, where he still is today. There isn't really a lot of progress in the case. But the reason why I mention the case is because I think it illustrates the many different dimensions that go into the blasphemy issue. First of all, you have a vague law that is worded very ambiguously, and that can be sort of applied to a very vast variety of situations. Second, you have one of the biggest problems in terms of the legal community in Pakistan is that there is a good portion of the legal community that believes in using the blasphemy law as a way of prosecuting and removing people whose points of view it does not agree with. So, even now the group Namus Risalat is currently behind Reuters, I think had a report last week, behind hundreds of new blasphemy cases. So they're actually encouraging and wedding people to file these cases on the blasphemy law. The other issue is that there are perjury requirements, or laws that should be used to prosecute the people who make these accusations, right? Because the blasphemy law currently has a death sentence in Pakistan. That's your penalty if you're found guilty. But those perjury clauses or the perjury requirements almost never, never actually used to prosecute. In terms of other cases, I mean, in the slightly less egregious cases, there was a big case from the National College of Art in Lahore in Pakistan, which again followed a very similar sort of denouement in which, again, there was a person who worked in that department who did not like certain professors. And so he organized a mob that came and wanted to take the professors, and they ended up filing these blasphemy charges. 6 people from the Department of Art and Cultural Studies at the National College of Art lost their jobs. They all have blasphemy cases currently, registered against them that have not, the cases have not progressed, even though there's almost zero evidence of their involvement in any actual blasphemous activities. So that is the larger framework. In terms of advocacy opportunities, I actually think that this is a pretty crucial moment for Pakistan. Last year, following the Zarbia's operation and other things that the government is doing, there has been a 56% decrease in the number of terrorist attacks. Um, what that has done is open up the space to start, pushing for human rights issues and women's issues. The government, this current government, has actually shown willingness to even review the blasphemy law, which is not something that we've been able to get from from recent governments in Pakistan. Of course, and in Punjab, they have actually also tried to, they have passed a bill that increases the investigative requirements for blasphemy cases. So that, I think, is a significant turn. I think that if Pakistan and the Pakistani government is encouraged to do this, and it's shown how that is such an integral part of the war on terror to protect higher education, is to protect freedom of thought, freedom of expression, professors, students. There is some room to get some traction on an issue. I mean, the law, as I said, 1920, it's been there since that long. But to review that law and to bring it into a form that that doesn't allow such kind of exploitation. And finally, these are 2 other laws that I think also need to be on your radar if you're considering Pakistan. Like the United States, Pakistan has passed a lot of anti-terror legislation. There aren't a whole lot of cases right now of professors who are whose research is being curbed under the use of that legislation. But it is definitely a possibility. Similarly, the Protection of Pakistan bill that's the name of that bill. The cybercrime bill in Pakistan also poses some issues because it essentially gives the government the power to take out any website, any links, any material off the internet that they don't think is in the interest of the country. And I think that is an emerging issue for scholars and students in Pakistan who want to express their thoughts and further their research in areas that may not be something that the government or the society is supportive of. So, thank you.
Thank you so much, Rafia. Emma?
Good afternoon, and I wish first to thank, of course, the Scholars at Risk and Ned for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to share with you some views about the current situation in Egypt. Can you hear me okay? All right. Okay. Okay. I just, have to do this. All right. Actually, within 7 minutes to 10 minutes, I prepared like 28 slides, so I cannot fit them all, so I'll have to be selective and just focus on the main themes. So that might come at the expense of coherence. But I think, just if we can highlight 2 or 3 or a few points, that would be good. Let me escape and then just go to mine. Just as a general introduction and just to set the general context, Egypt or Egyptians are divided between 2 narratives. One is the narrative of January 2011, the Arab Spring, the hope, the quest for freedom and the mass power and people power and so on. That's one narrative that is trying, of course, to build or seeks to build a democratic country, free in Egypt with self-determination and so on, all these nice things. And on the other hand, there is the June 30th and July 3rd, 2013 narrative, which is considered by some, including myself, as a counter-revolution, while many Egyptians, a good number of Egyptians, consider this as reinstating stability or restoring stability and reinstating the old state. So these are the two narratives, and you know exactly where my views will come from. I have it here, it's not showing there. Okay. I will need help, I'm sorry. I mean, I have a friend of mine who says usually technology or the computer sense your anxiety. So they stop working immediately. Anyway, so what I will do, I'll just, very quickly, I'll have to skip, but at least from July 2013, there is a process of consolidation of the current regime. You can call it military-backed regime. You can call it post-July 3rd regime, whatever you like. It's not the issue. The issue is the content itself. Through, of course, the usual tactics of consolidation, resorting to legal measures and also extrajudicial measures that included, of course, grave violations of human rights. And that's exactly what I will focus on. There were sources of dissent. The traditional, of course, or the expected Muslim Brotherhood, the largest opposition in Egypt, as the main political opponent of the emerging regime or the military-backed regime, universities, professors and students, activists and intellectuals, NGOs and press. As I mentioned, the consolidation process involved a crackdown on opposition, direct crackdown on opposition, as well as trying to reconstruct an authoritarian state with the objective, of course, to reinstate the fear barrier or the feeling of fear among Egyptians. If you conform, you are safe. So I fully understand the argument of Egyptians who might tell you, look, what we have now is stability, it's great. We always needed that general to take us from the ashes of instability and so on. If you conform, you are safe. If you do not conform, i.e. you do not recognize that regime, June 30th as a revolution, and the regime as a legitimate regime with all its violations, so you are at jeopardy, of course. And you are considered part of the opposition that deserves whatever it gets. What it gets, since the coup 3 years ago, we have 1,000 dead in one day. This is the Human Rights report, Human Rights Watch, which was confirmed, of course, by like IDs and everything. And from July until now, reportedly 3,000 to 5,000 dead, 17,000 injured, over 40,000 detained, and of course 1,480 death sentences, over 500 confirmed, and so on. Yes, this is very important. So far, 7 executions, 6 of those executed after they had been dead, their appeal was or had been accepted. Right? So they died, and then their appeal came and was accepted by the courts, but they were already dead. That shows, of course, or what Human Rights Watch described as Egypt's human rights crisis, and described this as the most serious in the country's modern history. Now, the legal context, over a period of 3 years, over 300 laws have been issued, laws, decrees, and so on, single-handedly by the interim president that the defense minister then appointed, and by Sisi himself, the current president, in the absence of a legislative body. Some of these, of course, affect the issue of academic freedoms and research and so on, and the life of universities in general. You have the anti-protest law, anti-terrorism law, press law, NGO law, and university regulations that affects, I will mention 5 laws that directly affect the university life and life of education. Now, just over the past year, just to put you in context, the Nadim Center for Rehabilitation of Victims of Violence, it reported some extrajudicial violations during 2015. And Nadim, of course, was closed 3 weeks ago. 700 cases of death due to torture and mistreatment in police stations, 474 deaths in clashes with police, 175 physical liquidation on the spot, 25 deaths during protests, 464 enforced disappearances, 23 civilians died in disputes with just quarrels with policemen. I know you are not, cannot remember all these numbers, and it's better to focus on one or two cases and so on. I understand, but I'm trying just to show you the gravity of the situation, because I think there is a dearth of knowledge about what's exactly going on in Egypt, especially by a regime that is sanctioned and well recognized by regional and international powers. It has not been condemned until now. Many sources have expressed grave concern about the human rights violation, but no one in Europe or here has condemned the practices or mispractices of that regime until now. Anyway, now I would like to, I know I have to focus on universities, but this is very important. Women, the condition of women under Sisi since July 3rd, 2013. Murder cases of women, 90 cases. Arrests, 2,500. Until now, 56 still in detention. Sexual harassment, 1,146. Arbitrary pregnancy tests, 317. Rape, 15 cases documented, 20 cases. Military tribunals for women for the first time in Egyptian history, 25 cases. Forced disappearance, 9. Death sentences, 4 cases. All right? Now, let me just run this tape. It might be a little bit graphic. It's very short, but it shows you again, this took place on campus, Al-Azhar campus, 2013. And it shows you exactly the tactics that have been used. If you look at the variety of violations, of course, this is all deliberate in order to create some kind of, as I mentioned, fear and also shock and awe. Like we are going to push back very severely in order to restore this level of conformity once more. All right, look at the measures that they have resorted to in order to, first, silence dissent on campus, and particularly among female. In addition to this, what you will see, also mass rape, sexual harassment, and so on, was deliberately used in order for women to disappear from the public sphere. That's the whole objective. Right, so let me just run this very quickly. Okay. They were simply mowed by cars. And this has been, there are 3 or 4 different cars doing the same thing. This one also shows you the extent of use of violence. What do I do? Yes, thank you. I'm sorry about that. It's okay. It's fine right there. All right. The same thing about crackdown on journalists. Also, even in comparison with Mubarak's regime, it's becoming really phenomenal in terms of the number of journalists that have been affected, that have been suppressed by that, and of course, it shows you the tactic or the strategy that's being used. You push people to conform, and at the same time, you silence those who can report about these incidents and so on. So you have the detention of journalists. You have also the referral of journalists to criminal courts and criminal trials, and even the killing of journalists on the spot. Now, academic freedom, 2000 until 2010, 2011, there was a presence of security forces, as you have seen, throughout Mubarak's regime, 30 years and so on, until 2011, the court banned the presence of university guards, or whatever you call them, security forces on campus. 2013, this was restored, and of course, the law also, a number of laws have been issued. One of them is to transfer university buildings, constructions, into military buildings, which means that they have a security and strategic importance for the regime. That's to say that they are treated as military sites. So any violation, any disturbance on military sites, of course, will render maximum penalty to those who are offending or violating these buildings and so on. So one is the restoration of the presence of security forces on campus. Second, of course, is that the president, once again, after the 2011 revolution, the heads or leaders of universities became elected. Sisi, of course, reverted to the old ways of appointing heads of universities, including department chairs. Also, there was a law allowing dismissal of faculty members who participate in party or political activities or violent activities on campus, dismissal of students who insult the president or any political symbol or undermine the prestige of the buildings of the institution, banning any party activities on campus, transferring, as I mentioned, university buildings into military construction. These are the direct laws. These were laws that directly, of course, affect university. Also, the atmosphere itself became extremely repressive. This is a sample of a pro-government newspaper that's acting as actually a reporter or a source of reporting on university professors. And here the news is, it is listing the names of 56 MB and MB sympathizers, professors, who their names were published, who were accused of sabotage and harming universities and so on. Now, in terms of the total number again, and I'm sorry to bother you with all these numbers, but it's very important. 255 professors detained since the coup, 13 dead, 13 professors were killed, 10 received death sentence, including myself, 5 sentenced to life, 53 dismissed, 28 at large, running away, 43 acquitted, and 134 were referred to disciplinary committees and measures. Students also, I'll just give the total number, 300 students have been killed since the coup of July 3rd, 2013. The number of those dismissed, over 1,064, arbitrary detention, 5,032, still in detention, over 3,000. I know these are just numbers and boring numbers and so on, but that shows you the extent of what's going on in Egypt, and it's still going on as we speak, because this regime has not finished the consolidation process until now. But that's a different issue. Now, in 2014, 2015, 24 students have been killed, over 10,000 arbitrary arrests from campus and from streets and their homes, 267 cases of enforced disappearance of students. This is becoming really a phenomenon, the phenomenon of enforced disappearance. And so far, the number has, among students, we're not talking about the larger number of 600 or over 600 and more, but among students, over 267. 1 minute, yes. I will skip some cases. How does that affect the freedom of research and academic freedoms and so on? Last month, 21 rights organizations, Egyptian human rights organizations and advocacy organizations, monitored 5 categories of violations. One is that professors and academics need the approval of state security in order to travel abroad on scientific missions. So you cannot attend a conference, you cannot go abroad until you get approval from the state security forces or agencies. The second category is the suspending faculty members from teaching. I have so many friends who still on the faculty, but cannot teach. They are not assigned any kind of courses or anything. Canceling academic agreements with countries that seem to be hostile to the current regime. Revoking certain graduate theses and interrogating their advisors. That happened twice, one MA thesis and another PhD thesis that were supposed to go for defense. Finished, completed, just they banned the defense. They did not allow the defense, and their advisors were interrogated for accepting to study or to have their students study these issues. And finally, revoking scholarships and research leave. Also, restrictions on research topics. Like, for example, academics are not supposed to touch certain topics like civil-military relations, the January Revolution of 2011, and issues that deal with, for example, with social movements, with labor movements, something that they consider as a threat to state security. Field work increasingly becoming extremely dangerous. Of course, the harassment of foreign, and we all familiar with the case of Regini, and this is not the only case, by the way. There were so many other cases, particularly those, but not reaching to that intensity, particularly those researching revolution or social issues, barring academics and researchers from entering the country. That you have the case of Michel Dunn, Atif Boutros, and Tunisian Amal Grami, Kenneth Ross, Sarah Whitson, all were described as representing a threat or a danger to national security. MESA also issued 2 months ago a letter warning against dangers of doing research in Egypt. Deporting researchers, Fanny O'Hare, was deported and because she was doing research on April 6th movement. Khouloud Saber, a PhD candidate in Belgium, her leave and scholarship was revoked, and she's an advocate, a human rights advocate, and she was asked to come back until she filed the lawsuit, so they let her finish. 4,600 prominent academics worldwide demanded Egyptian authorities to investigate cases of enforced disappearance. I have a long list of recommendations, and I know recommendations don't carry much. I will just leave you with one thing. This regime, despite its brutality, yields to international pressure. Its image is very important. This particular regime feels from the beginning that it had been isolated, and it would like to break that isolation. If you remember the case of Hussam Bahgat was already referred to state security interrogation, everything. He was in their hands. 3 days, Ban Ki-moon comes out, makes a statement, Hussam Bahgat was released. Despite all the laws, standing laws. International pressure bears fruits. The idea that we don't have any leverage over this regime, it doesn't listen to us, and so on. I can tell you about or share with you a number of cases where international pressure yielded fruit and was very productive. We should not give up, and we should keep putting pressure on that regime, at least to maintain international standards when it comes to fair trials, academic and university freedoms in university, and so on, and also compliance with all agreements that ban torture, bad conditions under detention, and that, I think, is a way to go. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ahmad, very much. And I share, and I know all of you, for all of our panelists, we could spend 2 hours, we could spend a day on each one of these countries. So thank you for all of us for tolerating the snapshot approach. So, Corbin.
Hello, can anybody, can you hear me? No? Hello? Okay. My name is Gorapin Popansawat. I come from Thailand. Today, I am giving a brief summary regarding the situation on human rights and freedom of expression in Thailand after the May 2014 coup d'etat. Um, the data came from my personal experiences and interview with those who were arrested by the military government, as well as report list above. They are available online. I would like to begin with the story of two individuals. First, Somsak Jiamthirasakul. He was a historian professor at Thammasat University in Bangkok for more than 20 years. He has been openly and outspokenly offered critical views toward the Thai monarchy. He became an academic celebrity as Thailand political conflict intensified. 4 months before the coup, Somsak's house was attacked by the unknown armed force. He was saved. After the coup on 2014, the junta summoned Somsak, but he refused to report himself to the authority. Now he is living in exile and use social network for political expression. He submit resignation, but the university filed him instead. He is now facing two lèse majesté charge. I will go into detail about this lèse majesté law. Second, on the left hand, Sirawit Seritiwat, aka Janil. He is an undergrad student at the Department of Political Science, Thammasat University, Bangkok. After the coup, Janil has organized several anti-coup activities, including a sandwich picnic, or a public concerts, or a train trip. Janil has been countlessly arrested by plainclothes officer. He was charged for public assembly. Occasionally, a group of an unknown man forced him to get into the car and cover him with a black plastic bag. This happened at the university campus. He was released later. So let me give you some political context of Thailand. On May 2014, a group of the Thai army called themselves the National Council for Peace and Order, the NCPO, staged the coup and overthrew the civilian government. They abrogate constitution and dissolve the parliament. Until now, the NCPO orders shall be obeyed as the law. Furthermore, individuals who commit the following crimes must be tried by the military court, namely the lèse majesté crime involving defaming and insulting the Thai monarchy, public gathering for more than 5 people, and the seditious crimes. So here is the statistic update. The number comparing to the Egyptian case, the degree of brutality is far lesser. So since the coup, at least 900 people were summoned to report themselves to the authority or visited by the military. 500 were arrested at protest sites. 156 are going to the military court. 85 were charged for public assembly, and 66 were charged with the lèse majesté law. So right after the coup, the politician, protest leader, journalists, activists, scholars were summoned, detained, and forced to sign an agreement not to lead or join any political gathering. Those who refused to report themselves would be tried by the military court and face up to 2 years of imprisonment or a maximum fine of $1,200. Some were detained and interrogated for 7 days. The military euphemistically called it attitude adjustment. Afterward, the military continued visiting these people's houses and workplaces, especially if they remained politically active. Many refused to report themselves and left Thailand. They became political fugitives. Somsak and Pawin, these are among scholars living in exile right now. The junta prohibit all political gathering. There were anti-coup demonstrations around the country, but protesters were arrested right away. When direct opposition was made impossible, the anti-coup participants invent symbolic expression conveying their political thoughts, including arranging a sandwich picnic or raising the three-finger salute like this. And reading George Orwell 1984, the junta criminalized this symbolic gesture. University students and young activists become leaders of anti-coup movements. They have organized public gatherings several times and were arrested and legally charged. Last year in July, some students were imprisoned for 2 weeks and were bailed out. None of them is currently in jail right now. Restriction on academic freedoms takes on several forms. First, any conference required an approval from the NCPO. Second, since the coup, more than 80 academic talks has been cancelled or interrupted by the state authority. University students are familiar with the plainclothes officer walking around campus. We can call it the militarization of university. On November last year, 2015, Egg University professor in Chiang Mai, the northern part of Thailand, read a manifesto, "University are not military camps." Afterward, they were charged for public gathering. So the last topic I would like to touch upon briefly is lèse majesté law. The law says that whoever defame, insult, or threaten the king, queen, heir apparent, and king regent shall be punished with imprisonment of 3 to 15 years. So after the coup, the problem is that the junta expand what counts as lèse majesté crime very broadly. They include a political play performed at the university, a private conversation in a taxi cab, or even a sarcastic Facebook message about the king dogs. So, moreover, the severity of punishment is increased. A man was sentenced to 60 years of imprisonment because of his 6 Facebook message. So the situation was not very good. In short, after the coup in 2014 and the rise to power of the NCPO, we definitely see the exacerbation of situation regarding rights and freedom in Thailand. And I will shortly touch upon in terms of advocacy. I think creating free space abroad for both scholars living in exile and those whose freedom was limited inside is very crucial. Like Professor said, international pressure is important. Thai junta, the Thai military government, despite all their violation of human rights and ignorance to universal principle, they are very obsessed about public image, how they were regarded among international community. So I think we should have some space, creating space for these people, these scholars, give them space to voice their story. And yeah, so that is my recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Korapen. And our last speaker for the panel before questions will be Matar.
Good afternoon. I'd like to thank NED and Scholars at Risk for their effort to cover the issue of scholars in Bahrain. And also, I would like to thank the National Academies of Sciences who also were covering the situation in Bahrain and the crackdown on academics as well. Before going to the issue of the academics, let me talk in general about, give you a broader picture about the situation in Bahrain and how the academics were targeted among the entire crackdown on all activists and all those who are trying to call for change toward more inclusiveness and respect for human rights and democratization and liberalization in Bahrain. So when it comes to Bahrain, it's important to understand the context and the structure of the government in Bahrain. And Bahrain is a kingdom. It's absolute monarchy where the king had a complete power on all major powers in the government. So the king in Bahrain appoint the entire executive cabinet, all ministers, the prime minister and all ministers. He also hired the upper house of the parliament. The king in Bahrain have the power to set the voting system, and because of his power, he used this power to marginalize the majority of Bahrainis and to control even on the elected chamber of the parliament as well. When it comes to the judiciary system, it's also completely controlled by the king. The king is the head of the highest judiciary council, and he appoints the senior judges in the government. In addition to that, the king has two extra rights. First is to give the Bahraini nationality to whoever choose without any justification. So the king used this power in a systematic and broad way to change the demography of the government of the country. And in addition to that, the king have the right to provide the public lands to whoever who choose without a justification as well. And he also used this right in a systematic and in a wide scale to concentrate the power toward people who are closer to him, member of the ruling family and VIP close to the ruling family. So the major role of this government at the end is just to control the wealth and the ruling family and whoever is close to the ruling family. The situation in Bahrain is complicated because the Bahraini community is divided into Arab and Persians. The majority of Bahrainis are Arab. They represent more than 90% of the population in Bahrain. There is a small minority of Persian Bahrainis. They born in Bahrain. Their father born in Bahrain, and they are totally integrated in the government and in the country, and they are major part of the population as well. And we also have a division between Sunni and Shia. The Shia represent about 65% of the population, and you have 35% Sunni. The Bahrainis represent half of the population, and the second half of the population are foreigners. 1/3 of those foreigners are Indians. The Indians represent a major part of the population in Bahrain, and they represent a major part of the culture of Bahrain. They have long history in the country, and they have their fingerprint in the entire culture of the country. We have another level and dimension of complexity, which is the regional part. We are a country between Saudi Arabia and Iran. The Saudis are having a very important influence on Bahrain and the economy of Bahrain. 2/3 of the oil production is coming from Saudi Arabia. And we are having a major refinery in Bahrain. We do the refinery for the Saudi oil through the causeway, and it goes back to Saudi Arabia. So, and when it comes to tourism, 80% of those who visit Bahrain are coming to Bahrain through the causeway between Saudi Arabia and Bahrain. 80%. 20% comes to Bahrain through the airport, which also give you an impression about the influence in many dimensions from Saudi Arabia about the situation in Bahrain. As things getting more complicated in the region in terms of the sectarianism, in terms of the conflict with Iran, all this is having a major impact on the situation in Bahrain. As a small country, it's very effective by all the chaos in the region. Another dimension of the complexity in Bahrain, the last dimension, is U.S. government. U.S. administration have a close relation with Bahrain after the presence of British in the 70s. After they left the country, U.S. administration were having the British role in Bahrain. So the Fifth Fleet had been established in Bahrain after the British left the country in the 70s. And unfortunately, it was the same period of dissolving the parliament in Bahrain. And this raised the issue about how to maintain issues related to human rights and democratization and stability at the same time, and how to do the balance between the human rights and democratization from one hand and with stability from another hand. So the military relation between Bahrain and US sometime marginalized the issue of human rights and democratization, liberalization, and the inclusiveness of the political system in Bahrain. In the uprising in 2011, Bahrainis went in the street to call for change. Comparing with the other Arab countries who participated in the uprising in 2011, Bahrain have two major characteristics. Bahrain was having the widest uprising per capita. The number of people who went to street per capita was the largest compared with all the uprising in the region. The second major characteristic in Bahrain was the peaceful approach. Comparing with the level of violence and the countries that faces uprising, the Bahrain faced the least uprising. And after 4 years, another major characteristics of the movement in Bahrain, that the momentum is still there. You'll see people are protesting from time to time peacefully and trying to use whatever margin, whatever small space to express their uh, uh, momentum and to express they are very serious about calling for change. Calling for change may look something strange for a country which is considered to be a wealthy uh, in a, in the part of a GCC. In fact, this is not the complete picture. First of all, Bahrain is not wealthy as the other GCC country. Second of all, Bahrain is much wealthier than all the other countries that started the uprisings in 2011. But at the same time, the issue was not just about prosperity. Major part of the motivation for the uprising was the dignity. The wide scale of marginalization of Shia and of Persian Bahrainis and from liberal Sunnis and all those who were calling for change in Bahrain was a major incentive and motivator for people to move. When it comes to academic, major part of the crackdown was on the academic. And this have long history. The government sacked a lot of scholars in Bahrain University. And the scholars did not show a clear position toward the political situation. But the government was very aggressive. Even those who were talking privately or showing a support, even if it is not publicly, they were targeted and they were sacked in 2011. The government, with a very strict rules and laws to restrict the freedom inside university, Bahrain University were putting restrictions on academics in university to talk in politics or to hold any political event inside university or to have any kind of protest inside university. In addition to that, slogans and titles about national security and national values were used to target academics and accusing them that they are threatening the national security and national values. And with such fake accusation, scholars were targeted. Anyone who had been targeted during that period, all his promotion will be postponed. And even if he finished the penalty, after he finished the penalty for any accusation related to these issues, he cannot be promoted even after he finish any penalty that he will face. Let me finish by talking about two cases for scholars who were targeted. One of them is Abdel Jalil Singais. Abdel Jalil Singais was the head of the mechanical engineering department in Bahrain University. He was having his own blog. He was active in public life. Abdel Jalil Singais broke the taboo in Bahrain, where no one was talking about sectarianism in the country. Everyone feel it. Anyone will visit the country will know how the country is facing a real discrimination and marginalization for the Shia community, but no one was talking about it. the argument for the opposition was, if you will talk about it, you will support the government to divide the country more on sectarian basis. The best approach is to avoid to address this issue. Abdul Singh was having different perspective. He spoke publicly about it. He wrote publicly about it. And he wrote about different dimensions that until this today, I think no one can address this issue until he released from prison. The issue that he was covering, no one is covering now, even after 4 years from the uprising. Abdul Singh was talking about the geographical segregation between Sunni and Shia in Bahrain. You will not find anyone addressing the geographical segregation except him. He was handling this issue. He was talking about the restriction about Shia to build mosque in the mixed area, the area that have a Sunni and Shia population. These issues are not being also covered even after 4 years from the uprising. He was targeted because he were addressing this issue. The government replaced him by another director for mechanical engineering department. Then he was arrested with other group. It was the first time in Bahrain to arrest a group of activists and accuse them with attempt to overthrow the regime without weapons. That was the first time to have the government's talking about a cell to overthrow the regime. This time it's with blogs, it's with tweet, it's with expressing opinions. So the opinion was the dangerous part on the government this time. Let me finalize with a recent case for Masoud Jahrami. Masoud Jahrami, recently the government revoked his citizenship and he had been expelled from the country. This is a new trend by the government to deal with innocent people. Some of them are not activists. It's just a policy to spread the fear among the community by revoking citizenship and expelling citizens from the country. This policy is increasing recently. 220 Bahraini, the government revoked their citizenship recently, just in last year. And this policy expected to grow with the time. The government divide the family of Masoud Jahrami. His wife is treated against cancer in the hospital. He left his wife in Bahrain at this difficult time, and he left his kids, and he was expelled from the country. And thank you.
Thank you, Matar. And again, my thanks to all the panelists for adhering to the time, which I know is impossible when you're trying to describe complex situations. We do still have some time for questions, so maybe we'll take 3, and then we'll do a second round if we have time. I would ask you just to give us your name, and then if we could, avoid statements, but questions, so we can hear from the panelists. So please, here first. And look right. Go ahead.
Scholars, intellectual writers as engineers of human souls. And I think it's significant and indicative of why authoritarian regimes or why illiberal movements like the Taliban target academics and scholars, because they realize that it's, in a large part, academic discourse which begins to set the frame and the narrative for what is legitimate political discourse. And I wondered whether the panel would accept that that was for example, a contemporary example, for instance, currently recently elected illiberal regime in Poland has recently targeted Jan Ross, a historian, who thankfully for him is at Princeton University in the United States. But they're threatening to withdraw a prestigious national award from him because of his scholarship, which demonstrates quite conclusively not only Polish complicity in the Holocaust, but Polish responsibility for the tremendous massacres in the Holocaust. So I think that's also I think, a telling example. And just one final point to note, just to add to Imad's exhaustive list of abuses, I think it would be remiss not to highlight the recent case of Leo Regini, who was a Cambridge University-based scholar conducting research in Egypt on an independent labor movement who was found, for all intents and purposes, being complicit in some of the atrocities there.
Thank you. We'll take two more here and then here. Okay.
Security forces or other state elements of the countries involved active in your knowledge in monitoring
Terrific. Thank you. And next.
Sharil Ismail. Professor Shaheen, I was wondering if there were any alternatives to both the military and the Brotherhood since 2013.
Terrific. So we have three questions. One, going backwards, in Egypt, alternatives between the Brotherhood and the military. Second was, anyone have any information on security services from other countries monitoring or tracking people, students or scholars here in the U.S.? And the first, if I got it right, was a response to the comment that there seems to be, while different, a common thread about the targeting of intellectuals. So why don't we just go straight to Emma? Go ahead.
Yes, sure. Okay, I think, just to respond to Martin's comment. Yes, I think the common thread amongst us is that we all are seeking to or protect or promote certain values that are embedded in the possibility of building a democratic system. And that touches on the alternative. That's all what we are seeking. We care about humanity. I mean, like the concept of humanity as we are all human beings, regardless of our differences, even naming military versus all this polarization. Muslim Brotherhood, we're all human beings, and we are all will be part of an inclusive system, whether we like it or not. Speaking about Egypt, anyone who envisions the possibility of building an alternative with the exclusion underlined of a certain faction or institution or group, we will not be progressing. The biggest challenge is how can we come to a common ground? A common ground that is very well enshrined in, with very small u, universal values that we can all share. Rule of law, pluralism, coexistence, tolerance, transfer of power. And these are, actually value-free, if you wish. Like we can all, who's going to stand against these values? That we seek a rule of law, or we seek transfer of power, or we seek a civilian rule, civilian domination of the institutions. The case of Thailand, the case of Egypt, the case of most Arab countries, the case of Bahrain, there is something that's really preventing the true essence of democracy from taking place. The monitoring, I think I addressed both the monitoring. I can speak about myself, and I hate to name names and who's doing it, but yes, there are very active and deliberate attempts to monitor, report, engage in character assassination of activists abroad. The gentle Mr. Brown, who's playing with his iPhone. All right. Okay, there are really measures, deliberate measures to name names, character assassination back home. I was described, for example, as leading a guerrilla warfare from Georgetown University. These are the informants, and you can guess who's doing what. It comes from, without just referring to specific names or areas. Yes, indeed there are, and I can go deeper, but I don't want to scare people here.
Is this ever visible and capable of
It's the misinformation, it's defamation, the deliberate defamation, for example, by certain individuals by name, filing newspaper reports about individuals here, activists here, for example. But of course, I mean, you cannot, for example, document a threat or something like that. They are very clever about these things. Calling family members back home at 1, 2 a.m.
Thank you. I'd like to respond to your question. I agree that that's a common thread, but I think the portion that often gets left out of a characterization that says that this is a common thread, and we have kind of, a liberal agenda, is the fact that on one hand, at least in Pakistan, but I would say in most Muslim countries, there are these curbs on speech locally, whether it's through the government or extremist groups like the Taliban. But particularly in the case of Pakistan, what I fear most and what is happening is a global isolation of Pakistani academics and Pakistani students who are not able to travel abroad anymore, who are not able to participate in global convenings, who are not able to access, owing to very high cost research materials from other countries. One specific example for right now is that the EU has changed its requirements on the Schengen visa, so that even if a Pakistani professor is trying to go abroad for a conference to present something, they get either a very, very small visa for one specific country instead of being able to travel. The security requirements, again, are often prohibitive. You have visas that don't come until after the conference. I mean, I have literally hundreds, thousands of cases like that. So I do think that in a discussion like this, it's also important to emphasize that part, because if you have, in Pakistan is 60% demographically, approximately 60% now under 20. So it's a very young country, and you want those students to be, engaged globally. But just as that is happening, the venues in which they can, have that kind of conversation are becoming increasingly constricted. So, that's what I would say to you, is that preventing, on one hand, the advocacy has to be directed towards governments that have laws that are curbing speech, that are being misused. But globally, it's important to recognize that increasingly, they're isolating Pakistan or Bahrain or Egypt is not considered a cost. It's like, okay, well, let them all stay in their country, and that way we don't have to engage with that. I really worry about that.
I can tell you, so this is my 16th year with Scholars at Risk, and I can tell you that we definitely have instances where we could have documented, where there was no attempt to hide the fact that officials were sent to an event. There were efforts to cancel events, both public efforts and private efforts to pressure U.S. universities not to hold an event or not to have a certain speaker. And I will never forget one example where we had a speaker who came, and he said to me before the event, he said, look, he said, during the event, you watch, I'm going to get incredibly hostile questions from many of the people who are here from my country. But if we wait 15 minutes, they'll be outside at the end and they'll want to talk to me. But they won't do it in the event with me. In the event with me, they'll attack me. And exactly what he predicted played out, and I've seen that many times before as well. So, okay, we have time, I think, for 2 more questions. So in the front, please.
Yeah, thanks. Robert, maybe you could actually respond to this. There's concern that on our college campuses, there's a growing intolerance, but it's not coming from foreign governments. It's coming from politically correct opinion, where anybody who doesn't, conform to politically correct opinion is disinvited. Could you comment on that and whether it has any relationship to what the panel is discussing?
Hi, is this on? Cheva Lehrman from USAID. Um, Pakistan and Egypt are two of the top recipients of higher education investments from USAID, mostly in scholarships and some in capacity development work as well. I wanted to get your take on whether you would prioritize pressuring for legal change and physical protections of universities over scholarships and capacity development activities, or if you would keep the balance as it is.
Well, why don't we do them in reverse? Because we're going to have to conclude. I may as well. So.
Okay. Wow. That's a good and a very complicated question. I think that there is a necessity, of course, to help the Pakistani government secure campuses because as we've seen in school shootings and things here in the U.S., it's almost impossible to seal off and provide complete security on any campus. But the government is trying to do that. I do think, though, that the scholarship money is really crucial to Pakistani students. I really cannot emphasize the cost of the war on terror on students and professors in the country in terms of the chilling of both, and I mentioned of course people going abroad, but there's also been a chilling of academics from here being able to go to Pakistan. And I think that the government right now, they're trying to really call 2016 the year in which terrorism is defeated, and these issues that have been kind of festering, issues of review of the blasphemy law, for instance. They seem willing to take that on, and I think it's a good idea to sort of promote that and to sort of give it some affirmation. The Council of Islamic Ideology, the government has said that they're going to refer the blasphemy laws to them. The Prime Minister, again, has, on other issues like honor killings and women's protection, he's taken a stance that has been far more progressive than previous governments. So I really think that it is an area right now, this moment, when the security operation is ending and they're trying to repopulate the northern areas, try to bring a sense of normalcy back, is a time when these agendas for both security on campuses plus this kind of continuing exchange, I couldn't emphasize how important they are right now. Thanks.
Well, this is a very good question, and it brings other also sorts of forms of aid that's being offered to Egypt. I don't advocate the either-or solutions. Whether we focus on education or we focus on legal pressure and stuff like that, or even to use whatever aid that is going to the Egyptian people or the people anywhere as a leverage in order to pressure regimes. I really don't like. This is not what I meant by pressure. What I meant by pressure, maybe you can discuss it, in another session or another event. But I meant in terms of, the very kind of international standards of fair trial, due process, torture, against detention, illegal or arbitrary detention. That's what I meant. And also in terms of sticking to the freedom of expression and general freedoms. Yes, keep the balance between the two. Maybe also when it comes to the scholarships, because there's another thing. Diversify the recipients, because exactly who's coming or whom the government is sending abroad and for what purpose and so on. It's a very good issue. And since we are also on that topic, also maybe an assessment of the educational aid that has been rendered to Egypt or given to Egypt since 1979, and whether education as a sector is one of Egypt's pride or it needs a lot of overhauling. That's, I think, what we can do, in terms of substance. Because nobody wants to harm the society or the state or any institution to that matter. When you talked about the alternatives and either or, we want a strong military, we want a strong state, we want a strong society, but all balanced. And within a rational system. That's all what we want.
The others? No. On the second question, I would also share the response that it's a much more complicated question, and organizationally, we are a pro-engagement organization. We are a network, right? And we are seeking partners all over the world. But I would say that I think incorporating the values that make the sector different and particularly valuable for developing democratically legitimate cultures and societies is important to guarantee that the investment that one thinks one's making in education will actually come out of it. And I think too often we take for granted the ecosystem of values from which all of the benefits from higher education culturally and democratically come. So you might still get the training benefits of higher ed, but you may lose out those deeper roots that I think really justify the investment in the first place. And so as to the first question, I think obviously it connects to that. I think the easy answer is I had a piece in the Washington Post a few weeks ago, and I think it's outside on the table. And it was right when the attack on the university in Pakistan happened. And it opens up by saying, when we see this, there's a tendency to see that one more example of an extremist act out there somewhere. But if we see that as disconnected from what's going on our own campuses, I think we miss the big story and the big opportunity. And in short, I think that what it is what is the role of the university space in democratically legitimate society? And in short, I would say that it is the place where, as I said in the essay, we learn to leave our guns at the door. And that's in the words of a Palestinian university president, where we're willing to say we will come in here and the rules here are you can't get your way by force or intimidation. So different members of society, different sectors come together and have to wrestle it out. And the way you resolve it is by saying, well, here's evidence, or here's more information, or we keep wrestling with it. And that skill set, that function, is, I think, quite unique to higher education as an engine of pushing that out. And so what we see on the campuses in Missouri, when they're posting social media saying, basically, if you're a black student, don't come to campus tomorrow if you want to live, that's an attempt to exclude one group from the conversation about what's legitimate, saying you don't belong in this space.
Think about it from the other end as well.
From the other end, well,
In other words, look, who gets disinvited to campus events?
Mm-hmm.
Not somebody who's defending racial justice in the United States, but somebody who seemed to be, quote, conservative in some way. Not to be racist in any way, but just conservative opinion is ruled out by a lot of groups. Is that a problem?
I think so. Where we come from it organizationally is that if coercion or intimidation are what is shrinking the space and excluding based on content, then yes, that is a problem. If the ideas are being filtered out by a legitimate process of inquiry, research, evidence, lack of argument, then maybe not. I mean, that is the function of the institution. But if you're saying that one who wants to comply with the terms of evidence and debate and discourse and so forth isn't allowed into the space, then that would be a violation of the core university value of equitable access, right? That the different members of the community are supposed to be impartial. And if we do that, and certainly I think you see in the sort of graduation protest period of people disinviting speakers and so forth, I do think we're shrinking our campus spaces in an unhealthy way. And we're therefore being disingenuous about what the terms of this conversation are. For our organization, we tend to focus on it when it moves towards the coercive, towards the physical. But I think even when it's in the non-coercive, it is on that continuum and troubling. So let me wrap us up there. But I will say, again, thank you to all of you for sharing the time. I know how busy everybody is. Thank you to our panelists. The other side of the slide behind us is that we will be continuing this conversation in Montreal. We do what we call our Congress, our network Congress, every 2 years, and it bounces back and forth historically between North America and Europe, although I think the next bounce after Canada may be Africa. So please, any of you who are interested, you can join us. If you have colleagues at universities, we invite you to help us reach out to them. And really, in particular for this room, I am certain there are people in the NED networks, either academics, public intellectuals, or activists who will be very eager to connect with our work and to this wider conversation really, going to all the points of the panelists. But I think what we see this is the university sector as an incubator, as an engine for a skill set, and for more even so than the knowledge it produces, but a skill set for how to wrestle with difficult questions in very complex places. And so we'd really welcome anybody who's interested to join us or help us spread the word. So thank you all.